Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our panel discussion with alumni members from DigiPen Institute of Technology, Singapore. I am Dina from ArtScience Museum, and today we will be inviting three very special guests. Jedidiah Siah, co-founder and director at AlterCulture Studios, Brandon Yu, game designer, programmer, and artist, and lastly, Celine Chen, junior level designer at Ubisoft Singapore. They will be presenting different ways to approach game development. They will also be sharing personal stories about their journey on becoming a game designer. At the end, there will be a Q&A segment, so do share any thoughts or burning questions that you may have for our speakers. This live stream program is part of a collaboration between ArtScience Museum and DigiPen Singapore. DigiPen Singapore is a specialized university for the digital economy with a focus on computer science, embedded systems engineering, UX UI design, and digital art and animation. They are one of Singapore Institute of Technology's overseas university partners and have been offering undergraduate degree programs in Singapore for over 10 years. This collaboration features a lineup of programs that includes online talks by faculty members, an on-site showcase that features playable games by students, and a live tech demo on face capture and motion capture, and this evening's panel discussion with DigiPen Singapore alumni. This is a live stream event and we are now live on Facebook and YouTube. And we welcome you to share your questions for Jedidiah, Brendan, and Celine at the chat box. So without further ado, let's welcome Jedidiah, Brendan, and Celine into the room. Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Hello. Hi, everyone. All right. Thank you so much for joining us and making time for this panel discussion. Maybe we can do a quick round of introduction. We can start off with Jedidiah first and then followed by Brendan and lastly Celine.
Yes, hi. So as Dina said, I'm the co-founder and the director of my own company, AlterCulture Studios, where we teach game design as well as work on different game-related projects. And also, I have a Bachelor of Arts in Game Design from DigiPen.
Hi, I'm a solo indie game developer. I do art as well. I'm currently working on a physics-based smash 'em up called Skull Chains, where you fight your way out of hell. I have a Bachelor of Science in Computer Science and Game Design from DigiPen.
Okay, hello, I'm Celine, and I'm currently working as a junior level designer at Ubisoft Singapore. So similar to Jedidiah, I have a Bachelor of Arts in Game Design from DigiPen Institute of Technology, Singapore.
Thank you so much, Jedidiah, Brendan, and Celine. Brendan and Celine, we will speak to you in a bit, but first let's kick things off with Jedidiah Siah, who is co-founder and director of AlterCulture Studios Private Limited, which offers game design consultation, education, and promoting the usage of games across non-gaming industries. He is also an associate trainer at Civil Service College Singapore for game design. He has been researching and experimenting with the usage of games that explore social dynamics and cultures, and he holds a Bachelor of Arts in Game Design from DigiPen Singapore. So Jedidiah, please take it away.
Thank you. Thank you, Dina. I'm going to have my lovely colleague backstage to help me put up the Mentimeter, just to get to know the audience a little bit better as to like what kind of games do you play. I hope y'all play games, but just in case you don't, I actually included an option where you don't play any games at all. I will not look at the results until maybe towards the end of my presentation. But just to start the conversation going as to like what are games and what do we think traditionally of games. So please go to menti.com, enter the code that you see above, and then you can simply key in your results based on what you play. So I'm just gonna let the screen hover for about maybe 15 more seconds. Houdin will also be pasting the link to Mentimeter as well if you do not want to key in the code. Yes. Ooh, okay. Very interesting results. We have someone that actually plays sports. That's very good. We need more sports people. I don't play any sports at the moment. going to the gym doesn't count as a sport. Yeah, a lot of PC consoles. Yes, thankfully nobody has said none of the above. So yeah, I as I've only listed a few categories of games here. Actually, later in the presentation, I'll be talking about more types of games for you to kind of think about as I talk about and introduce to the concept of like how everybody can be a game designer. So I think then I'm just going to go straight into my slides. So I'm just going to start sharing. Just give me a moment to switch my windows. Okay, there we go. Okay. Yes. So thank you everybody for coming. So this is my presentation and sharing on how anyone can be a game designer. And I started this presentation with the thought of trying to inspire everyone to start thinking of themselves as a game designer, because all of you certainly can. I know I did. So I've already given my background of who I am. And I also run my own company. This has been mentioned earlier. And I was a student at DigiPen. So how did this journey start, right? How did I decide to get into the games industry or even start my own company? Well, I think like many people or many kids from my generation, I had a very difficult relationship with my parents. That's my mom over there. And, you know, when I was younger, she would always berate me for playing games and only using it as a form of like reward when I actually complete something, right? So games in my life when I grew up have been a little bit of a sinful products in the household. But fast forward to today, where you can see my mom actually playing games on her mobile phone when she's taking a break from work. So jokes on her. Now everybody is playing games, right? And so I think the role of games in everybody's lives is kind of unavoidable, especially if we live in a very technological age. But I remember when I was starting out, right, I would already draw mazes. When I was on the school bus, I would draw these like very complex mazes, and then I'll pass it to my friends and get them to solve it, right? And actually, mazes are already form of a game, right? There's a goal that you get towards. There are rules, which is you have to follow the walls of the maze. So at a very young age, I'm already creating games. And all of you probably did at some point as well. Remember when you go to the playground and you have playing games like catching, you have other variations like freeze and melt, or eagle catches the chicks, right? And you would come up with all sorts of like house rules, and that's how you know that even as a kid you understand the innate concept of like what is a game and how do you win a game, right? And that's why all of us really can come up with a game at any point of time, even when you're an adult. And so my journey began when I had these Pokemon figurines and Pokemon cards. I would collect and play with them. But after a while, I got bored and I started to make another game out of these components. First, I placed the cards in a board arrangement, and then I placed the pieces that move around this board. And then I would roll dice to kind of dictate the number of steps that I can move the figurines, and I'll play against another friend, right? And so I already came up with a new whole set of game just out of sheer materials of pieces of figurines, cards, and dice. And that is something that I actually teach a lot in the game design class that we teach at AlterCulture Studios, Paper Playground. I introduce them, people, to the concept of what makes up a game and how they can quickly create a game within like half an hour to 1 hour using very simple materials, no programming needed, right? So that's my first sharing. You do not need to learn programming to start game design, contrary to popular belief, right? You can actually just have pen and paper and boom, in front of you, you have a game that everybody will love to play, right? But I guess my journey doesn't stop there. Starting from my journey as someone who loves games, like every other Singaporean, eventually I had to face the question, what was I going to do for my degree? And so DigiPen was actually not my first choice. My initial first choice was actually accounting. And then I thought to myself, you know what? Actually, I don't want to do accounting. It's so boring. So I decided to not go and get a degree immediately. I actually worked as a personal trainer for a couple of years, and I was pretty good at it. Ran my own branch. And so when I was going to settle down and choose my degree, I was going to choose physiotherapy out of all the degrees because, it's related to personal training. And when I got to the exhibition, I saw a booth with these two lecturers, John Duran and Joe McGinn. They were having like a conversation, and I saw the title, DigiPen game design. I took out the brochure, and that's when I knew that this was the one for me. I took the brochure home to my parents, and they were like, you know what? That makes sense, right? So my whole thing of physiotherapy, I didn't even pick out the brochure for that. Game design was the option, and I went with it. And that's how I ended up in DigiPen. So while in my 4 years of game design at DigiPen, I had to take up an internship, and I applied to the Civil Service College Applied Simulation team, in short called CAST, which was started by Mr. Peter Ho. So you might be wondering, how does the government has anything to do with this, right? Well, in the CAST team is very unique. Basically, Mr. Peter Ho was very inspired by the concept of wargaming, where soldiers would prepare for wars by going through scenarios that is much like a game. And therefore, he thought to himself, Mr. Ho, what if we use the concept of wargaming for public servants, right? When we encounter citizens, when we encounter real life situations, we need to be prepared as well. And we could use these games to prepare the civil service for such situations. So an example here is Villa La Rose, which is a game that the CAST team created. And this was inspired by the Maplewoods condominium incident. If any of you are old enough to know this, back then there was a condo, and the government was trying to build an MRT shaft in front of the condo, and it blocked the condo view. So the residents were unhappy. And basically the whole incident was not very well mismanaged, which inspired them to create a game that is based on this scenario, so that if it happens again, perhaps the civil servants would do a better job in handling the situation. So these are the sort of games that I was exposed to while doing my internship, and I found it so enticing and exciting that games can be used even in such industries and fields. There are also other types of games. Remember how I asked you the Mentimeter at the start, right? There are also these games called live action role-playing games. Very similar to somewhat like an improv, somewhat like an immersive universe thing, but in real life, where you put on costumes and you play out the scenarios. And this particular game, Adventures of the Temporal Displacement Agency, was started by Void Deck Games by my friends Raihan and Joe. And in this particular game, I played a photojournalist along with 4 others who went back in time to save Singapore, to prevent them from surrendering us to the Japanese, so that we don't have to go through the perils of Suqing. But we did go back and we did change history. But what happened? Well, basically, when we came back into present time, Singapore became Malaysia. And so we were offered a choice. Either we go back and undo our actions to prevent Singapore from becoming Malaysia, but then we'll be stuck in the past, or we will remain as Malaysians. We chose the Malaysian option, and then we had to cut our fake ICs as a form of a metaphor for, giving up our Singaporean identity, and we had to sing the Malaysian anthem. So this whole game experience, right, was such a interesting one, because it made me reflect on my relationship to what it means to be a Singaporean. And I think it's games like this that are super useful in helping us think about things that we don't usually think of in a very experiential way. And so I think I just want to share here that, there's so many types of games that are not just mobile and board games that we're used to. They can be used in many ways as well, in art, experimentation, and experiential learning. And that is also very freeing, right? Like, if you don't know programming, you can also create all these other mediums of games that you might have access to, because some of you might be able to draw, write, etc. And yeah, my last point of sharing is, circling back to my journey of starting out in personal training and going to physiotherapy and then coming to game design, right? Like, at the end of the day, I didn't grow up with a game design background formally, and I think that's the same case for many game designers. So I actually organized this game jam called the Heritage Game Jam, where we encourage a lot of our participants to come up with games in a week around concepts of heritage. And in our participant pool, we have different types of backgrounds. Game designers, artists, writers, they're all there, you can see. Some of them not traditionally game designers. What we did was we paired the people that didn't have a programming background with those that do. And in the end, they collaborated to make like so many wonderful games. And you can actually find them online online and play them at heritagegamejam.com. And I'll also be organizing another one this year. So my third point of sharing is that, you don't actually have to start in the games industry. Be it you're 10 years old, 20, 30, or even older, it's not too late to start creating games that might be useful just for yourself for fun, or even for the industry that you're working with. Like, games have a lot of power that way. So how does one even start, right, in terms of their journey? So I think one can start in many ways. When we talk about Extra Credits, which is a YouTube channel, they offer a lot of fundamental game design concepts that you can learn for free. So that's a very good starting place. You can also go and look for the game community in Singapore, the games industry. Singapore Games Association can be found on Discord. You can speak to everybody from students to professionals, all willing to share their opinions and advice on what their journeys have been like in the games industry. You can also attend game design classes. If you're looking for a 3-hour experience, something to do on the weekend, you can look for us. Or if you want, you can also attend maybe a student shadow class at DigiPen, where you can have a taster of what a game design class is like. You can also attend game design competitions, much like the one that I'm already organizing, but there are already a few out there internationally that you can attend. But specifically for ours, if you don't know how to program, we are more than happy to put you with people that can, so that you can come up with something. And if all else fails and you want to try something small, just pick up your pen and paper and start creating something on your own. Find some friends that like the same games as you and just test the game and see where it takes you. Because I think that's where most of us, the three of us today, have started as well. So that concludes my very brief presentation on what I have seen in the industry so far. Please feel free to look for me on any of these socials. And I will pass my time back to Dina. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jedidiah, for your presentation and allowing us to pry a little into your personal life. Just curious also, then now, do you actually game with your mother? Or does she still nag at you for gaming too much?
Well, I think the benefit of running my games company is that now she can't say anything if I'm playing games. I'll be like, it's for work. But I mean, I'm more thankful that she has always been supportive. I remember even when as a kid and I created that cardboard game that you saw, they immediately went outside and looked for ways to publish my game. And back then there was no games industry when I was like 8 years old, but then they introduced me to the concept of intellectual property at 8 years old, and they're like, you have to protect your idea, so that in the future you can publish it. So I think even if they don't necessarily play the same games that I do or appreciate the games that I advocate, they definitely can see that it is my passion and they've always been supportive.
Aww, that's really sweet. Yeah, I think it really helps when you have a support system, especially parents that are so endearing. Thank you very much. And when you were sharing about the Heritage Game Jam, actually, it reminded me very much of the current exhibition that we're hosting right now at ArtScience Museum, where we have interdisciplinary collaborations between a game designer and a media developer. And similarly, I think for our Heritage Game Jam that actually went from 31st July to 7 August 2020. That was part of the Singapore Heritage Festival. I am very, very fascinated. I think the visuals also is very beautiful. I wanted to find out more. How is it like creating something so big like that, like a game jam that's really huge, but then with the pandemic, and because game jams typically they are on site at a venue where game developers will camp out pre-pandemic, but now converting a program entirely on a digital platform. How was it like for the Sagakaya team?
Yeah, so the Sagakaya team, which is me, Gwen, and Jewel, we just started with this idea of like, hey, typically the games that we play for a long time has always been contained within the games industry. But how about we collaborate with other creators from other skill sets, right? And because of the pandemic, I think it forced us into the online mode. But not only did it give people something to do because we were all trapped at home, it also then allowed us to reach out to other industries that typically wouldn't participate in these things. And so that's And so we actually had only planned for maybe at max 50 people, but just by pure word of mouth and almost no marketing, somehow 150 people just joined. So we were just like, it's just the three of us. So I think it was just very organic. We just happened to come in the right time, and there is truly a lot of passion going on, not even just from the games industry, but from other industries as well. And so I think the whole thing has been very rewarding, and since then we have attracted quite a bit of attention from other organizations who have seen what we've done, and we are in the talks of like trying to organize more game jams for them as well. So hopefully this is the start of like a chain of different game jams to inspire other industries. Yeah.
That's great. That's great. And in fact, this year also the project has expanded to a Project Tea House 2021 Play from Home, which also includes a virtual exhibition and an online interactive experience. Can you share a bit more about this virtual exhibition as well?
Yeah, so because of COVID again, we can't do like a physical exhibition to present all the hard work of our participants. So we decided to come up with an online one where you can actually walk around the space, and it just closed yesterday. But essentially you have these cute characters as avatars, and it feels like you are exploring an HDB flat, but it's actually an exhibition. And it was National Heritage Board that came forward to us, and they were like, how come y'all create a Heritage Game Jam, never call us, and so that's really how it started, and they supported us in creating this exhibition for Heritage Fest. And I have to say I'm pretty happy, because even the booths themselves were drawn by the exhibitors, and we just simply helped to align it with the rest of the art. So that's all there is. It's just presenting the hard work of the participants from the previous game jam. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Thank you so much for sharing. And the big question really is, are we hoping to see another game jam this year?
Yeah, for sure. Planning one around November. Can't say much yet, but hopefully people will enjoy it. Yeah.
Thank you, Jedidiah. So keep your eyes peeled for the upcoming game jam.
Yeah.
Thank you again for sharing all your experiences and your knowledge with us. So if you have any questions for Jedidiah, please gather them in the chat box for the Q&A section later. Thank you again. Next up, we have Brendan Yu, who is a game designer, programmer, and artist. He graduated with a Bachelor of Science in Computer Science and Game Design from DigiPen Singapore. He has made games such as Scrap Metal, Alpacalypse, Skull Chains, and Melody of Explosions. He is incredibly passionate about game development and having completed dozens of game jams and competitions, and also placing well in several. In his spare time, he enjoys digital painting and programming various tools. Let's pass on the time to Brendan.
Hello. Let me try to do this share screen thing. Share screen. Okay, there we go. Here we go. Hi, everybody. I'm Brendan. So, now that Jedidiah has convinced you all that everybody can be a game designer, I wanted to go into a bit more detail about some tips that can help you get started from my own personal workflow for making games, but this time specifically for video games. But before that, let me introduce myself properly with my official game developer license. As you can see, I'm a jack of all trades and I can do code, art, and design. However, I should note that you don't have to have all of these skills or even any of them to start. So, as a kid, I always liked making games. I made trading card games, I made board games, I even made my own custom tabletop role-playing games. That's how I started. So some of them were popular amongst my classmates, others not so much. I once made a trading card game about feet that included creatures like Superfoot and Bigfoot and Smallfoot and Footfoot. Footfoot had feet for toes. That one turned out quite popular to the point that people started making forgeries of the cards and ruining the game balance. But anyway, the point is, I really loved making games even as a little kid. I eventually did also make video games early on as well because I found I had a penchant for programming, but honestly, I had no idea what I was doing, which kind of made it even more fun. It was like exploring a completely new world. So that's something to keep in mind. Being uncomfortable can be a good thing. So you can use your the fact that you're new to game development as an advantage. So I went to Neon Polytechnic and I got a diploma in multimedia and animation. I did a lot of art, I did a lot of animation, but I decided I wanted to properly make games. So I entered DigiPen Singapore, a university for game development. So to prepare, I gave myself the task of making one video game a week for 2 months. Some of them turned out great, some of them not so much. But this was the point at which I was like, hey, I really like making things. I like making experiences. I like machine guns and explosions. And so I entered DigiPen Singapore, and I thought it was going to be scary, but it really wasn't. Of course, it was like, a lot of hard work, especially since I can be socially awkward at times. But I was surrounded by skilled, passionate people who I looked up to, and that was invaluable for me and my learning. So it turned out to be very fun. My fears were unfounded. I graduated last year with a Bachelor of Science in Computer Science and Game Design. As I mentioned earlier, I like doing design, art, and programming, so I really wanted to go solo. So I did. Right now I'm working on Skull Chains, a physics-based game wherein you smash skulls into demons, you fight your way out of hell. It should be releasing in a few months, so if it sounds interesting to you, Google it and the Steam page should come right up. You can wishlist it. But back to the topic at hand. A lot of people ask me, whether it be on Discord or Twitch or Twitter, how to get started in game development. And my advice is always the same. Make small games. In fact, the prototype for Skull Chains was made in just 2 weeks, so I still use this process of making small games before I dive in deep. Making small games allows you to be familiar with the complete cycle of game development, which is really not all that mystical. In fact, I'll break it down right now. It starts with the ideation phase. This is the part where you come up with a game idea, and then you immediately go into iteration. And you repeat the iteration process over and over until you eventually finish the game, which is usually the hardest part. Then you restart the process with another game, but this time with more knowledge and a more refined skill set. So this is a very, very simplified diagram of it, obviously. But notice how I said that finishing is usually the hardest part. This is why it's important to practice the entire cycle as a whole, and why making small games is a great way of getting started. Practicing the cycle over and over can help you hone your skill set and eventually let you make more intricate and refined games. But it is important to finish that cycle. So before going into any further detail, I did say that this will be especially about video games. So let's talk about some game engines that you can use to actually start making some stuff. So there's Game Maker Studio, which is great for 2D games. Unity, which is great for 2D and 3D. Unity is free, Game Maker is not. There's Twine, which is great for choose your own adventure narrative experiences. Ren'Py, which is great for visual novels. And Bitsy, which is great for very, very small, contained, again, narrative experiences. You do not need any knowledge of code in order to use any of this software, though it is highly recommended that eventually you start picking up on it because it can speed things along. Out of these, I recommend Game Maker and Unity. It's worth mentioning that Game Maker's specialty is 2D. If you wish to do any 3D at all, Unity is your best bet. There's other engines options out there as well, so feel free to do your own research. But I should stress this, that once you've decided on an engine, try to stick to it at least for a few games. So, you have your engine ready, you're motivated, you're ready to go. But what do you make? It can be kind of hard to start creating things when you have no idea what you want to make. And that's the problem that I encountered early on. So, this is a recipe that worked for me. Take an existing simple game idea and twist it. So it can be, for example, a first-person shooter where you can only punch. I made a game like that. It was called Scrap Metal. You punch like robots and they exploded. It's pretty cool. Or you can make a role-playing game with no battles. How about a platformer with reverse gravity? So the key thing to notice about all of these are well-worn genres that you can basically take and twist into your own thing. So for your first few games, it bears repeating. Make small games. Scope small, then scope even smaller. You want to make your first game as simple as possible. Try to finish developing it in as short a time span as possible. Your lofty ideas for gigantic, massively multiplayer games can come later. For now, just finish something. So let's see an example of this ideation and iteration process with the iteration of a simple game. So let's start with a basic space shooter, right? So this fairly ordinary is similar to, say, Space Invaders or Galaga, and you basically just shoot at these enemies as they come down. Very simple. Let's change something. Let's make it so that you automatically shoot. And this is a very minor change, but it's worth mentioning because it's important to note that removing things can also be a valid change for making a game. So now that we've removed it, we see that actually it's kind of still a bit boring and there's not really much going on. So how about we do something to the bullets themselves, since they're one of the entities that's moving about? Let's give them gravity. And already this is a bit more interesting. We've made like kind of a ball pit, and like you can move around it. And at this point, you can ask yourself, like, what is the challenge of this? Well, the challenge of this is maybe to avoid the balls. So maybe the balls are bombs, right? Maybe they explode. And maybe you can like hit them before they actually explode to move them around. Or if your timing is off, you can get hit like that. So from here, you can then see, oh, actually, I can keep iterating on this, and I can give them a bit of randomization, for example, right? Like this makes it a bit more unpredictable and a bit harder to actually dodge the bombs. And from here, you can keep iterating on and on and on. What if you added a timer to keep track of the score? What if the enemies were reintroduced? You can iterate to your heart's content. As you can see, we started with something fairly basic, and we twisted and iterated it until it ended up being something completely different. It bears repeating that there's nothing new under the sun. Find your inspirations and twist them. And for your first few games, don't worry too much about the right way to do things. Just get your hands dirty and get it working. As you make more games, you'll progressively get more skilled. Naturally, you'll start to kind of find your own process. It might take a few years though. But at the start, I was very much focused on doing things the right way. And this sort of hampered my progress. I overthought things too much. I didn't act enough. I didn't make things enough. And because I didn't make things enough, I didn't go through that entire cycle of like iterating and finishing things. The process of making things will help you answer questions you have eventually. So don't sweat it too much. So to make sure your iterations are working though, it's not enough to just play them yourself. You have to remember to playtest constantly. Just ask a friend or family member to try out your game and give honest feedback. This will let you refine the product and, more importantly, your skill set. Neil Gaiman said once that writing a good novel was akin to walking down the street naked. That may be how your first rounds of playtesting will feel, but it is incredibly important. Books are meant to be read, music is meant to be listened to, and games are meant to be experienced. That's how you find all the little problems in your game, and you get better and better, and make the game better and better as well. And finally, after all that hard work, you've done it. You've made a game, and now what? So like I said earlier, it's a cycle. You don't stop at one game. You get better, you improve your skill set, and you keep making stuff. You make another game, you make another game, and you make another game, right? But don't forget to have fun while doing it. Making games can be hard, and sometimes it can even be frustrating. I'm in several game development communities, but I find that a lot of people tend to find it very frustrating to make games. And I think being playful with the creation process and trying out new things will give you the power to do incredible things. If you have any questions, you can send me a message on Twitter. I go by the username ChowClips. Some people say KOClips. I have no idea how it's pronounced. I also stream game development on Twitch under the same username. And that's all I have for today. Thanks for listening, and now I will pass the time back to Dina.
Thank you very much, Brendan. That was really amazing, wasn't it? As shared by Jedidiah in the chat, it was all fully illustrated on Unity, right, Brendan?
Yes.
How long did it take you again to come up with your...
Couple hours, I think. Yeah, it took a couple hours.
Wow. It was really, really amazing. I think if I can share from the rehearsals that we've done, Brendan was always including more illustrations into it. We get slightly more excited each time. So even with this session, there were a new addition to the presentation. It also got me a little ticklish at parts, especially the food trading cards. I think a lot of people enjoyed that too. And right down to the nitty-gritty details. It wasn't just a step-by-step into becoming a game developer, but how you've illustrated it in parts to create an animation that was truly, truly enjoyable. So thank you again, Brendan, for sharing that with us, for putting that all together. But if I can quickly just find out from you, being an indie game developer, if you can just walk us through a day in the life of Brendan Yu, how does it look like for you?
Well, I have a pretty messed up sleep schedule, so it varies from day to day. But usually I wake up. Nowadays, I try to blast my face with sunlight and try to wake up. And then I try to stream once. Like nowadays, I'm trying to stream once a day, where I do game development on stream. But in addition to that, I usually also do stuff like have design notebooks. Here's like a frog with a pompadour, and that's an axolotl with a gun. And like I try to write down a lot of ideas that I have. So I think like David Lynch, I was watching some talks by him, and he always said that writing down ideas is very important because it's kind of like fishing, right? You go out, you put in your hooks, and you're not sure really gonna get anything or not. What's important is that you keep trying, and once you get it, you have to write it down to solidify it. Otherwise, you're gonna forget it, and if you forget it, that's a terrible thing. I also tend to do a lot of art. Here's something that I drew a few days ago. There you go.
Wow.
Here's something that I did. I did a lot of like hatching. There you go. Yeah.
Wow, pointillism.
Yeah. Not pointillism. It's just hatching. But I do
Insane.
do some pointillism stuff. And yeah, I also tend to like look at a lot of inspiration. So I don't just look at games for inspiration. I tend to look at like stuff like I have this that I got recently. Hellboy. I tend to like a lot of like art, and I find that it gives me a lot of inspiration. Frazetta, stuff like that, and I find that all of them together kind of give me an overall vision that I can take into my games.
Oh, that's so amazing. I think having you to share your visual journal with us, I think me coming from an art school, I truly understand having a visual journal is so important. Wherever you go, in every step of your journey, anything could excite you, anything could be of inspiration. And I do agree with you that having a notebook on the side, whether it's penning down ideas, and I think in the chat box someone was saying that the real issue is having too much ideas. I think having them noted down, because having a book, then you are able to revisit ideas that you previously had, and it doesn't mean that the ideas have been scrapped. Having that noted down also means that, you know, this was something that you had thought about, that came across to you at a random time, and there's definitely a potential to expand that or to start on something even fun, like you mentioned, start somewhere and start small, right?
Yeah, one thing that I would like to like add to that point is that one thing I forgot as well is that at the end of every day, I would actually record all the progress that I did for that day. I've been doing this from about 2017 or 2018. I'll have an image or a GIF or a recording of something, just so that I can go back and see how much progress I've made or like what I've done per day. Because it can be easy to go, oh, I didn't do anything today, like yesterday or the day before, and it's easy to fall into the trap. So doing all these things is kind of not worthless, but like it can be accentuated if you actually record it down.
Agree. And also allowing you to look back to see if you feel like you procrastinated, actually, it's okay to take a moment. And also, I think it's wonderful to hear about keeping track of your progress and not worrying about it so much. I think you also mentioned about keeping track of sleep. I think what's most important, and I cannot agree more, that self-care is one that we often take for granted, or that is often overlooked at. And even for myself also, I find that it is very important. So when you started off with trying to catch more sleep and having more sun, I can completely relate to that. I think I also agree more, whether it's having to have slightly more hours to sleep in over the weekends, self-care. I think taking care of ourselves is also just as important. So thank you again, Brendan, for sharing your presentation in this short span of 15 minutes. We will speak to you in a bit. Thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
And last but not least, we have Celine Chen, who is currently a junior level designer at Ubisoft Singapore. She graduated with a Bachelor of Arts in Game Design at DigiPen Singapore, where she worked on student games like Toping, Honey Chase, and Eon Born of Light. Her interest in level design grew during her university days and has since evolved to become part of her daily life working at Ubisoft Singapore. She is passionate about creating, engaging, and making unique gameplay experiences and enjoys gaming herself, including reading graphic novels and painting during her free time. So let's hear more from our last speaker for this evening, Celine. Celine, please.
Hello, everyone. Hello to everyone in the chat. Just give it a moment for the share screen to load up. Okay, so today I'll be talking about my game development journey into level design. Okay, so just a quick table of contents of what I'll be going through today. There'll be a quick self-introduction, how I managed to get into game dev, a short introduction to level design, and I'll also be sharing some of the principles and tips and tricks that I've learned throughout my journey. So a quick self-introduction and how it all started. So it actually started because my dad was pretty much a gamer himself. So he actually owned the Sega Genesis, and he urged me to play Sonic with him. So it was my first console game and also my first digital game. He also encouraged me to play Pokemon on Game Boy Color because back then it was trending amongst the kids, and he wanted me to have a go at it as well. He also brought me to arcades where we played Street Fighter, Metal Slug, Daytona, and more together. So at this point, I was pretty much into games as a kid, and my parents started getting a little bit worried about me playing too much games, just like every other Singaporean parent. And at this point, in order to get myself the newer consoles like PlayStation 1 or 2 at that time, or the newer console games, I had to offer sort of a trade with my parents. So what I did was I offered good grades in return for new console games. So usually I'll get an A in math or something, and I'll get a console game in return. So that's how I actually managed to continue gaming. And as I grew older, my friends introduced me to Steam, and that's where I discovered the wonders of online games. So I've been pretty much a console gamer from young, and I turned into an online gamer now. So yep, the exposure to Steam allowed me to play more online games and more indie games, and also more AAA games actually. So getting into game development, so a bit on my timeline. I started off with a very different diploma in experience and product design with Singapore Polytechnic, but I wanted to take a turn in my career because I wanted to work on something that I'm more passionate about. So I decided to pursue my Bachelor of Arts in Game Design at DigiPen Institute of Technology Singapore. And DigiPen allowed us to have a 6-month internship, and I was lucky enough to be able to snag a position at Ubisoft Singapore as a level design intern. So 6 months after interning there, I was able to turn my internship into a full-time position as a junior level designer at Ubisoft Singapore, which is where I am right now. So back to making student games in DigiPen, these are the main 3 steps that I usually take when building my games. So first of all, conceptualizing. So this is the process where you can expect tons and tons of iteration. So everything here is just bare bones and just very rough ideas. So this is where I usually jot down my notes and sketches of my levels in my notebook. And I'll walk around school with this notebook, go towards my teammates, my friends, and even my lecturers to ask for feedback. So to me, this is a really important step because you know that there's going to be lots of iteration. So if you were to build a full-fledged level in a professional engine, it's going to take a lot of time to iterate. So the second step. So once you sort of have what you want on paper and pen, this is where you move on to prototyping. So basically putting your ideas into a game engine. So you can see that the environmental models and the character models, they are all placeholder temporary assets. So this is where we keep the game like really rough and really simple. It basically, we just want to get the core mechanics down and get the core player experience down. So once you are happy with your prototype, that's where we move on to building. And this is where we replace all the temporary assets with actual assets. And we get into more details, like the positioning of certain items. And also generally, this is the stage where we start to make everything look better. So these are some of the games that I built with my teams in DigiPen. So I was lucky enough to be able to pick up some of the level design roles in these games. So it's quite important for you to pick up the specific roles that you want to work on in future in these games. So speaking about the different types of game design, of course, we have the all-rounded game designer, that's good in every part of this, but we also have specialized roles of game design. So just to name a few, we have level design, which is mainly building and crafting the player's experience through the game's levels and environment. So we also have system design, which are designers who focuses on the systems in the game. So this can range from something as small as how far your weapon can reach to something as large as an entire combat system. So we also have UI UX design, which are designers who creates the interface for the game, and they are responsible on for how well the player communicates with the game. So sound designers are people who are behind the art of creating and adding in audio elements to the game. And lastly, we have narrative design, which are designers who are in charge of writing part of the game story, being in charge of the game characters, dialogues, quest content, and more. So these are just some examples of specialized game design roles that I've listed. There are actually a lot more. You can give it a search if you're interested. So from here on, I'll talk a little bit more about level design. So what exactly is level design? Basically, it is the process of creating an environment in which the player interacts with the game world. So some examples of level design in real life. So if you remember the last time you've been to IKEA, you remember seeing the black arrow markers on the floor and tons of signboards hanging down from the ceiling to make sure that the customers don't get lost. So what IKEA does is that it has already planned a route, which is the white dotted line on the map, for their customers to go through. And of course, this route will include them being exposed to all of their products in the store. So apart from this main path, IKEA also has these shortcuts that are boxed out in red. So these shortcuts allows their customers to get to other areas quicker and also allow them to backtrack. So apart from these, shortcuts also act as a form of distraction. So if you were in the bathroom section, you kind of take a peek through the shortcut and you'll see the work area, and you might actually want to take a shortcut there instead. And this kind of creates a bit of back and forth for the customers. And this allows the customers to stay in the stores longer. And, the longer you stay in the store, the more things you might add to cart. So this is actually part of how IKEA uses level design to strategize the placement of their products. So another example of level design that is used in real life, we have Disneyland. So Disneyland is probably a place that many people are familiar with. So Disneyland has the main street, which is the area in red with a roundabout. So from this main street, it will branch out to many different themed areas, and these different themed areas will all branch out to each other and then back to the main street. So this allows the park goers to kind of be able to walk around in a loop and not be stuck at any dead ends. So another thing that Disneyland does really well is that it makes really good use of landmarks. So for example, the Princess Castle in Fantasyland is usually the largest and most memorable landmark, and it's usually placed in the center of the park. So it kind of has a wow factor for customers as they first enter the main street. The first landmark that they see is the Princess Castle, and it will stay in the back of their heads as they were to travel through the entire theme park. So from here, I will share some of the level design principles that I've learned throughout my journey and have found useful using and has found use using. So the first principle would be that good level design shows the player what to do, but not how to do it. So basically, players should be clear of their objectives at all times. So instead of just bombarding your players with tons and tons of text that can be super boring, players can look into other forms of visual cues. So for example, the first game is Until Dawn, so it's a horror game. And just like every other horror game, the setting is really dark and they make use of lighting as a visual cue. So there's a torch right next to the door to encourage players to enter the hut. So another example would be Mirror's Edge. So it's a really fast-paced game and it uses the color red to paint the interactable objects. So the color red kind of shouts at the players even during a fast-paced game like this. So it's really easy for them to traverse through the level. So the second principle is that good level design allows the player to control the difficulty. So we can do this through the use of risk and reward. So for the first example, which is Mario Kart 8, and in fact, in most driving games, the players can choose to take the risk of actually bumping into obstacles like these green tubes. But if they were to be able to skillfully maneuver through these tubes, they'll be able to reap the rewards of being able to be slightly quicker than their fellow competitors. So another example from Sekiro, well, the player can choose to stealth and avoid engaging in combat with the enemies, but they can at the same time choose to get into the risk of having their health depleted, but instead be able to reap the rewards of possible rare item drops or gold. And the third principle that I'll be sharing is that good level design evokes emotions from the player. So different emotions can be evoked by level design. So in this example, I've used darkness. So darkness in horror games like PT, they evoke fear from players, but in stealth games like in Assassin's Creed Valhalla, darkness provides feeling of power and safety instead. So some of the tips and tricks that I find useful as well. So the first one would be affordances. So basically having clear and consistent rules in your level. So this example from Assassin's Creed, basically these buildings have ledges that are consistently used for wall climbing and hanging. So it's important that you make sure that every building that has ledges that look like this can be used for wall climbing. If there were to be a building that has a similar ledge but at the same time cannot be climbed, it might be immersion breaking for the players and they'll be confused as to if the next building can be climbed or not. So the second example would be the use of leading lines. So basically using environmental elements like hills, cliffs, rivers to guide a player's eye towards a certain location. So this is a great way to use environmental elements and level design to guide the players without the need of using text. So the third tip would be the use of denial and reward. So this is actually an architectural technique used to design paths. So mainly the player is given sight of the main objective, but the most obvious path towards the objective is blocked. So players will need to look for an alternative route to get towards the main objective. But while they are doing this, they will have the main objective at the back of their heads, and it makes it a more interesting level to traverse through instead of having a point A to point B level. So the fourth tip would be the use of landmarks. So this is similar to what I've spoken about regarding the Princess Castle in Disneyland. So basically, to make use of memorable landmarks so that the players know where they are at the level. So in this example, it's a game called Journey. So the ginormous cliff is actually the endpoint of the game, and it makes it easy for the player to know which direction they should travel to, even in a place like a desert. So the final tip that I'll be sharing would be breadcrumbing. So another alternative method to guide players towards another location instead of just using text and tutorials. Basically, this example from Monster Hunter, it makes use of footprints. It kind of scatters footprints around the world so that the players know what is the direction they should take to find the monster. So this is the last tip that I'll be sharing. So just to summarize things, went through my game development journey. I went through building a portfolio out of the games that I've made with my team, the different types of game design, and I've also shared some of my level design topics. And basically, if I were to have any words to say to people who would like to kick off their game development journey, basically is to always have a passion burning for games. Don't be afraid to turn your ideas into a reality. Try to discover your interest in specialized roles of game design if you have any. Otherwise, feel free to be a jack of all trades like Brendan. And start building up a portfolio of games that you can be proud of. And lastly, to just keep making games. And that's the end for my sharing. So thank you for tuning in. You can contact me at my email. I think I'll now pass the time back to Dina.
Thank you very much, Celine, for walking us through your journey with us. I think we all agree that Celine's deck rocks, right? Which think so. He has allowed Celine to go through some of the games, and I remember those games too, like for like Sonic and Sega Genesis. You know, the whole cartridge thing where you blow and you knock it down hard. But just really nice, good old memories there. But sorry, I digress. Celine, if you could share actually with us a little bit more. I mean, being in a AAA company, is there also a game that you're currently obsessed with right now at this current moment, other than working on a game at the company? If you could share more, what's that game as well?
Okay, so currently I've been really into an MMO, which stands for Massively Multiplayer Online RPG, role-playing game. So I've been playing Final Fantasy 14. So back when I was working physically, I didn't really have much time to play MMOs. But now that it's work from home, I get to save a lot of time, like traveling and preparation. So I was able to start playing more games like MMOs, and Final Fantasy 14 was actually introduced to me by my friends. And yeah, it's been really addictive. There's tons of content. I'm still going through it right now. And yeah, the game has a really interesting and profound storyline. And so far, I've been hooked, sometimes even spending my lunchtime on it. Yeah.
I've never played that game, but it really sounds quite. When you say massively multiplayer, it really sounds quite insane. But can I also find out from you if you've actually created some of the games for yourself? Because I imagine being in a AAA company, was there any other opportunities for you to create your very own in your free time, for example?
Yep. So even though I'm working in a AAA company, I do have time. Sometimes when I get the inspiration, be it from movies, from other games, or from Netflix dramas, I will kind of just open up a professional engine. I usually use Unreal Engine to just build a level out of the theme that I'm inspired with. Yeah. So I still do have some time to do it. Yeah, usually over
Right.
the weekends. Yeah.
Nice. Thank you again, Celine, for sharing. And thank you very much for all your presentations. If I can invite all our speakers back on screen. So we have Jedidiah, Brendan, and Celine.
Hello.
All right. Hello again. And the chat box is pretty wild. There are a lot of comments, a lot of support as well. But first, again, I want to thank all of our speakers, Jedidiah, Brendan, and Celine, for your lovely presentations and all the time that you took to put them all together. I think it's really wonderful to hear all of your personal stories that you've included in there. So thank you again for sharing your processes up to where you are now. So this is where we begin our Q&A segment. So I think we do have plenty of questions from the floor, and we will get to them maybe one at a time. We also have some people tuning in from South Australia and Adelaide. So hello to all our international viewers. Thank you again for tuning in. If there are any more international speakers, do share where you're tuning in from. We would love to hear from you as well. Let's start off with the first question. I think we have a question. There were plenty of questions where Jedidiah and Brendan assisted in answering them very quickly too. So thank you very much for that. There were some questions about the workshops that you run, Jedidiah. I think there were some colorful frogs. Maybe you can also share a bit more about the kind of workshops that you run at AlterCulture Studios.
Yes. So I mean, the idea started because when I was interning and currently working at Civil Service College, they also do have their own internal game design classes. And I thought to myself, well, why not? If people can spend money to like go to a leather workshop, right, to make wallets and all that, why can't you spend money to learn how to create a game? I mean, it's the same thing, right? And in that way, I also think that because games in the past had this conception that, oh, you need to know programming, it's very difficult to learn, and I just wanted to kind of break that down, that barrier, and that's how the class started. And so I remember I even had this bunch of girls, not to stereotype gender stereotypes, but they basically created this game about shopping, and they converted my whole like classroom into this like, oh, you have to go in and find the right item to woo your best friend, and you have to compete to be the best friend, and they even had like NPCs. So some of us acted as NPCs and playing this game, and it's supposed to be a physical representation of this the digital game that they want to create, right? So even though they don't know how to program, they managed to bring out their concept perfectly, and that allows them to explain it to maybe someone that knows how to program. And that's because of the game design class that help them understand the structure of a game so that they have the vocabulary to describe to someone else, like, this is what my game is about. So that's how my class usually goes. Yeah.
Thank you, Jedidiah. We also have a question from Sin, who is asking, who's saying hi as well. Hi, Brendan, Jedidiah, and Celine. Could you share what inspires or informs your practice and how you adapt your creative process across the different projects that you are developing?
I guess Brendan, you want to go first? You look like you're going to go.
No, you go first.
Okay, so I think I do less game design nowadays because when you run your own company, there's a lot of other things to take care of. But I am actively working on one game right now, and I can share a little bit about it. I'm assuming that my screen share is gonna work. So this is like the earlier prototype. I'm not sure if people can see it. And this game is temporarily called Boundaries. And it was inspired by me coming from therapy, actually. I thought about some of the things that I went through in therapy, about how when I am with my therapist, there is a safe space to discuss very personal issues. And I kind of want to bring that out in a game as well. So in this game, you each take a color and you draw a question card. And from there, you can then fill up the hexagon to your heart's delight. And other players can, of course, do the same after answering their questions as well. And so, this concept, I liked it so much because when I was playing the game with other people, there were very unique conversations that were very vulnerable. And that's because of the engagement of the game itself. There's something about the game cycle as you're answering the questions and filling in the hex. It brings out a certain amount of comfort and vulnerability to people and allows them to connect. That was me, inspired by therapy and my love for games and game design at the same time. So I take inspiration from everywhere. I take inspiration from media, as Brendan has shown all his books. I take inspiration from my real life. I take inspiration from other industries, and I try to come up with something original by presenting it in one certain way. Yeah, so that's me. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm currently working on a game called Skull Chains. Let me see if I can share the screen. Give me a sec. Okay, there it is. So this is some progress from today, actually. So you guys are getting a sneak preview, kind of, maybe. But basically, it's a game where you have to like swing this skull, and you basically have to use it to defeat enemies, and you battle your way out of hell. So for my inspirations on it, I actually made this game already in 2 weeks in like 2015 or 2016, and I put it on mobile phones. So actually, a lot of my inspiration comes from myself because I actually take a lot of the games that I have made and I actually make them into more fully fledged products. But also nowadays, I'm trying to look more towards actually having more inspiration outside of the just gameplay mechanics, which is why I'm looking more into like horror movies. I've been watching horror movies. I've been playing horror games, and I've been reading horror books. Clive Barker is really good, and I would not recommend this to anyone because I'm a huge coward. But yeah, so I think looking into the thematic relevancies of like a game rather than just the game mechanics, which a lot of designers can fall into that trap, is very interesting. Yeah.
Actually, Brendan, if I can jump in here also. Oh, you have
Yeah.
more to share with us, please.
Oh no, that's
Is
for
that-
another question.
Okay, because I was also just reading up a bit more or like looking out for skull chains, right? So I realized that hey, it's actually not just a arcade game of rotating skulls on chains, but there it was also featured around a month back, I think in August, on Virtual Southeast Asia's website that had their weekly news update. And Brendan was actually placed side by side with games like Skull and Bones by Ubisoft Singapore, which I think Celine will cover in a bit. So where they officially announced the game in the face, I think having Skull Chains on that same platform, I think it was pretty nice to see that to see Skull Chains being featured in an article like that. But I also believe that Skull Chains comic, there's a Skull Chains comic as well, right? That appears with the game. Do you want to elaborate more? Was that did the comic come about first?
I just started working on the comic because I was like, man, I really want to make a comic. I need a good excuse for this. So I started making that comic, like because I just had like a whim on one day to just make a comic. I have these weird creative whims where I just want to make a project. So the other day, actually, oh man, oh no, I cleaned up my desk so I don't have it right now. I had a zine that I like printed out, and it was like how to actually like draw monsters and like how to come up with ideations for like monster designs. And I printed it out and I folded it
Nice.
into a nice little package, and I was like, this is awesome. And like yeah, I just tend to do those things like from time to time. So the comic was just another whim, but it probably will end up in the game at some point as well. Yes,
Right,
there's law,
thank
I
you.
guess.
Thank you. What about you, Celine?
Yeah, so currently I'm working on Skull and Bones that was already previously mentioned. So it's an upcoming game that revolves around piracy and naval warfare. So I can't disclose much, but a challenge for me making this game basically was trying to familiarize myself with the theme and the setting of the game. So to be honest, I haven't played a lot of games that include naval warfare. So I think the only one that I played was Assassin's Creed Black. So apart from that, I'm still quite foreign to the theme and setting of pirates, and I've been trying to work on some research to familiarize myself with this theme. So I've been into watching like pirate movies, and also like there was a new Netflix series about pirates. So I've been trying to watch those just to familiarize myself with the game more. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Celine, for sharing. Wow. So your kind of research will include watching hours and hours of movies and just learning more about pirates.
Yep. Convenient.
And if you can also share, we have a question from Dawn for Celine. How did you decide that you wanted to specialize in level design actually? And what do you enjoy most about it?
Okay, so it was actually during my first game making module in DigiPen that I realized that hey, level design is actually super fun. So back then, I think I was the only one in charge of level design. So I just started out with some sketches. I did some research online. I went to look up like how other designers design their levels, and I actually find it super interesting that so much thought has been placed behind a simple placement of just one simple object. So it really inspired me to pick up level design as a career. And yeah, I was super happy to find out that Singapore Ubisoft actually has a position available for a level designer. Yeah.
Wow, that's so great. Starting off with the internship first and then actually getting a position in the AAA. Congrats again, Celine.
Thank you.
We also have a question here for everyone, for the alumni. How did you guys decide to go the indie startup AAA way? And what are the pros and cons for each of the paths?
Okay, so I guess I can start first.
Yeah, Celine, go first.
Yeah, so for me, it was pretty obvious since my passion was with level design. And so usually in indie studios, you kind of have to be all-rounded. And it was only in AAA studios that they offered specialized level design roles. So my path was kind of already there for me to take. And yeah, that's why I decided to go with the AAA studio. So I guess some pros of being in a AAA studio is that you are exposed to lots of people. So you work with lots and like huge groups. And these huge groups, they can come from different backgrounds, and they all have very different skill sets. And you will also be able to find people who are super experienced. And yeah, I'm glad to be able to work with those people and learning lots of different kind of skill sets from them.
Okay, so for me, I actually wanted to go solo since as far back as I can remember. Actually, as soon as I wanted to make games, I wanted to go solo. So actually, I said I have a Bachelor of Science in Computer Science and Game Design. But what I didn't say was that while I was in school, I was practicing art almost every single day. I would actually join into BFA classes. So I wanted to be able to be an all-rounded uh, designer, artist, coder. I wanted to be able to do all of them to a relatively okay degree, enough to make my own game at least. So yeah, I think that for the pros and cons, the pros is that for me the main pro is that it's my work. It feels like I have a lot of ownership over it, and I feel like working in a group is great. But personally for me, like as a personal thing, I actually prefer to like make my own little small projects, and I like the fact that I can kind of go wherever the wind sail, like wherever the wind goes, right? As for the cons, there are quite a lot of cons though. One of the cons being that you don't really have a fixed schedule, so you have to make that fixed schedule. You have to kind of teach yourself discipline, and you have to make sure that you do the work, but not enough, not so much that you it becomes unhealthy, which is also a big danger, but you have to do enough. One thing that's helped me a lot is basically streaming my work. I find that a lot of people keep me in check, and you might think they keep me in check from doing too little work, but it's actually the opposite. They tell me to take breaks and stuff. So that's great. But the other con would be that I think in the AAA studio you have a lot of very, very experienced people, as Celine just said. And that can be a very big learning, that can be a very good way to learn. So what I do to circumvent this personally is that for a while I actually will actually study every week. Like I will actually take time to study. I might actually read like actual papers on certain things, or like certain programming paradigms or like design paradigms or something like that. I will take time every day or well every week to like learn, and that's how I'm keeping myself in check. I'm not sure if this is the best way to do it because I'm still pretty new to it, but that's how I'm doing it at least.
Yeah, I share a lot of the same hardships as Brandon because I mean, I didn't exactly go independent, but I did do my own startup. And my main motivation for doing my own startup was also partly because I had a very supportive co-founder. So my co-founder is not from the games industry. In fact, he's 30 years in the insurance industry. And it was through I know, right? It's through very deep conversations about like how games are being used in alternative spaces, that we are like, hey, there's so much room and opportunity for games to be explore, and this will also help to shift the perception of games. I think, as I mentioned in my presentation, there is still this notion that games are addictive, they are bad for your children, right? But on the contrary, I think there's so much that you can do with games as a medium that a lot of people tend to overlook because of their preconceived notions. And so I saw that, I have a lot of friends like Brendan and Celine who are already very passionate in what they do and pushing their craft. And am always going to be there to support them. But also, who else is there to push that work for helping to shift the perception of games and expand the usage of games? And I mean, that's what primarily fueled me to do my own thing. And also recognizing that if I want to do this work, I can't do it alone. And that's why I started to reach out to other employees to join me and do this company together. So it's super challenging. It's not for everyone, be super passionate. I'm still learning. Currently, there's no business course in DigiPen. DigiPen, please, consider doing something like that because that'll be helpful. But but also the type of learning that I had, I think, through starting my own company is probably something you can't get by joining a AAA studio. Not that one is better than the other. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing all of your processes, or even the struggles, the pros and cons. I think if we can just go back to a question that was shared previously when Brendan was presenting. I think Brendan has got quite a strong fan base. A lot of questions on how did you create your presentation. It was really cool. Maybe we can get a sneak peek into how the presentation was designed on Unity, or like
Let
how
me
did
share the screen.
I think we had
There we
other
go.
questions. Like how did physics come into the game for skull chains? Okay, maybe we can get to that in a bit. But your
Okay.
presentation first, yes.
I'll try to address these fast, like one after the other. Okay, so basically how I made the actual presentation was in two parts. First part, I actually had this custom animation importer that imports animations from this program called ASprite, and I applied a shader on it so that it actually wiggles. And look at that, it's not wiggling right now. Wait, when I click on it, it wiggles. Wait, there we go. You see how it wiggles a bit? That's basically a shader. And the way I'm doing it is I'm having each game object be a slide, basically. And the child game objects, as you can see, are numbered in the way that they will appear on the screen. And that's it. So that's literally all I did to do the presentation. It was pretty simple, and I made it in a couple of hours, including the art. So in regards to the maths and physics question, that's a little bit... no, that's not a screen I want to show. Wait, that's a little bit more involved. So if you're using Unity, or you're using GameMaker, or using something with an inbuilt rigid body physics system, then a lot of the work is done for you. But if you want most of the control, like for example, you're using GameMaker, or you're using most engines that are 2D, they will require you to have like a basic knowledge of vector maths, right? Which is all this stuff. So you can just search vector maths, and then after it will give you a basic understanding of that. And if you want to do the collision yourself, I would recommend this book, Real-Time Collision Detection. There's a book of like in the DigiPen library. I think it's always checked out because everybody's using it all the time. It's called the Orange Book because it's so famous. And I also recommend this website, which not many people know about, jeffreythompson.org/collision-detection. I'll actually paste it into the private chat so that it can be pasted into the YouTube chat. Even because right now, like, it's in a window, sorry. But yeah, like this basically goes through and actually tells you how to do like point intersection, rectangle intersection, and all the basic stuff that you will need in order to make a custom physics engine. So I would highly recommend this resource. And that's basically all there is to it. When you're studying this kind of stuff, it's best to just try to put it into a game and try to get it working as fast as possible. So I hope that answers that question. Actually, I'll just paste it into the chat myself. Okay, there we go. Sorry. Okay. Yeah. I hope that answers that question.
Thank you, Brendan, for giving us a quick insights into how the presentation was done and some tips and tricks as well. If we can just also include a question, I guess it's for everybody. When you are creating games, um, and this areas of game development is where you don't have much experience with yet. So I think if we can direct this question to Celine, because previously you worked with your team on Toping at DigiPen Singapore, which is actually a 3D action strategy game. And now that you're working on Skull and Bones with Ubisoft Singapore, which is a multiplayer video game about piracy and evil warfare, how do you then work on a game like that?
Okay, so basically, usually when I'm exposed to like areas of game development that I don't have much experience with, um, the answer to it is to do tons and tons of research. And um, by doing this, I kind of can get lots of help from experienced designers who are online. So some of the websites and videos that I frequent includes GDC, which is Game Developers Conference. I think um, the moderators can help to drop the link. Websites like Gamma Sutra and also videos from extra credits that Jedidiah have mentioned before. So these are some of the videos and websites that I frequent, and usually I do get my answers from them. And yeah, I feel that they are actually really good even for beginners. So apart from these, I also get to approach my talented and experienced teammates. So lucky for me. And yeah, that's basically what I do usually when I don't have much experience with what I need.
Thank you, Celine. I think we also have a question from the floor. Question from Edmund, where where you have a massively multiplayer online role-playing game, such as Genshin Impact and Mobile Legends Bang Bang, that is drawing a lot of fans and money. So, what is the difficulty of creating uh, MMORPG, PG, and how can Singapore overcome this barrier? How do you
Okay,
pronounce that
so
actually? Do you say it by the acronym?
MMORPG.
Okay.
Yeah, but we just usually call it MMOs for short.
Okay.
So basically, I guess MMOs or actually like multiplayer games in general, they are super hard to create. They are super hard to balance, especially. So if you would kind of aim to create an MMO, you will basically, I'm not super familiar with this, but I'm guessing you will need very powerful servers to uphold the game. So yeah, I guess it's a task for probably uh, companies that has kind of a budget for it, because I think it's gonna be more expensive compared to the normal indie games, the indie single player games.
Yeah, actually, I want to add on to what Celine said. I mean, it's besides just the technical aspect of maintaining huge servers, you also have the marketing aspect. Like, you need to make sure that the world knows about your game so that you actually have a massively multiplayer online, right? Otherwise, who's going to play a game? You also need like a community manager to interact with the community, make sure they know about the events, right? There are just so many aspects to it that you just need a huge ass company to run the game. There's no ways about it. So yeah, it's complicated in every way.
Well, this is a tough one. So, Jedidiah and Celine have already said all that I wanted to say, but I wanted to add one more thing. If you're willing to make a concession, i.e., remove that first M, remove the massively part. If you're able to make a small, massively multiplayer online role-playing game, my friend is actually making one solo. He's making one solo. He's using Amazon servers for it. He's making it so that like everything is synced up in real time, and he's developing all the code from scratch. So, in addition to that, there's always MUDs, multi-user dungeons. So those are very, very old MMOs from the past, from around the 70s or 80s, where they were really popular. But they are basically text-based MMOs where you can type in the command and it will basically execute it. They are still played by a bunch of people. So a lot of people actually make their own variations of it. And I know there's this indie group from the Netherlands called Sokpop, Sokpop, and they make one game every month. One of the games was an MMO, and it was basically a text-based MMO where you could go around, you could pick up items, you could throw them at players, and you could basically just have fun in this very small contained world. But it's kind of like not exactly an MMO since there's no, like I said, there's no massively part. But if you're ready to make that concession, you can make something small like that.
Well, there's
Basically
also
kind of
there's the RPG version part of it too, which
Yeah,
is
there's an RPG part of it too. But then after that, and most MUDs are RPG based. There's also some that aren't. Those are called MOOs, and some of them are not RPG based.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a good point. But yeah, like making an MMORPG, tough job. It's a really tough job.
Let's take Brendan's cue then to start small and then do plenty of it. And then just keep trying, just keep going, right? Because it's really not about making the biggest game or the best game in terms of scale, the biggest one ever. It's really about being able to complete the game also, whether it's doing 20, 30, 100 games. And I think picking up some of the speaker's tips that you've shared tonight, making every game different, having your own special touch to it, and then really looking at the fundamentals. I'm also very aware of the time. If we can actually do one last question for the evening, if you could also share one life motto that you swear by or that you live with up till today when you are creating games or when you are developing games, and what keeps you motivated in the things that you do. And also, if there are any advice for future game developers out there, what would it be?
I guess I'll go first. So, I think my motto is embracing change, and I say that from many aspects of my life. I think, as you saw my journey, like going through different fields of studies and industries, I learned to take whatever I learned from the previous field and apply it to the next one. And you know, some people may not like that change, right? They'll be like, no, you got to stick in this one lane forever, otherwise you never get good at it. And I disagree. I think that the more you embrace change, the more you learn how to create things that are original and wonderful. And I mean, isn't games all about change anyway? Like when you go through a game and you try to overcome the obstacle and complete a level, right? You're also learning, right? As you are being thrown a different set of obstacles. And if we can enjoy games and enjoy the challenge of games, I think we can also apply that to whatever we face in life as well. Yeah.
So I agree a lot with Jedidiah. I think variety is the spice of life, and I think without it, you won't be able to kind of branch out, try out new things. You know, make your game as varied and tasteful as it could be. But for me, my motto will, I guess, be, if I had one, be passionate, be disciplined, but don't burn out. So burnout, I think, is a very dangerous thing that you can get into. Personally speaking, when I went into DigiPen originally at the start, I decided before I went into DigiPen, I wanted to try to make one game a week for 2 months. This was without any knowledge in how to make games or how to like do proper programming. I did a bit before, but basically I was working most of the day, each day, and that kind of wrecked my health. And being the genius that I am, I didn't learn from that, and I continued wrecking my health. And I don't think it's a very good idea to do that, because in the long run, it's gonna be bad for you. You're not gonna be able to make the stuff that you want to make. You're not gonna have the energy to do what you want to do. For tips that I will give future game designers, I would say take inspiration from more than just games. Like I said, there's a lot of value in learning mechanical or narrative stuff from games, but there's a whole host of media out there, right? There's a whole host of stuff that's not been like discovered yet, and there's like, you know, books, movies, music, even, right? Like Neil Gaiman said that. I think Neil Gaiman said that one of his primary inspirations was music, actually, or poems for his novels, right? So I think that you can kind of like get a lot from different parts of your life. Yeah.
Okay, so for me, I guess is to just keep being passionate about games. So don't be afraid to play games even after 8 hours of working on games in the morning. And also try to play games like and look at it from a different perspective. So if you were to find something interesting or unique about a game that you like, note it down and search it up. Don't just walk past it and forget about it afterwards. And for tips for people who would like to start game making, basically just start small. Don't start off with an MMO. And perhaps a single player would be a good start. So don't need to go super crazy with tons of mechanics. Sometimes a couple of good core mechanics are what you need to make a great game. Yeah.
Such great advice. I think I'm very, very inspired. I would like to start my own game right after this. And I think all the points that
should.
you shared, yeah, it's very inspirational even for me. I think on Jedidiah's note on embracing change, I think we all can, we all are in this situation right now and we are all experiencing it all together. So I think if you have had some doubts or queries on where this is leading to, I think rest assured that we are all in this situation. We are all experiencing this, and if we are feeling uncomfortable, that's fine because at least we are all in this together. We just need to go through it one at a time and less pressure on ourselves. And tapping on what Brendan has also shared about taking it slow, being passionate and knowing your own capabilities, and again self-care. I think I also hope, Brendan, that you've had some rest after releasing the game. And I do agree that just making time for yourself, taking care of our health is above the rest. And lastly, also, Celine, you mentioned again the same point that I am feeling from all of your presentations, how passionate you are in making games. And we appreciate you coming out and sharing with us on your journey throughout. And we wish you the best in your journey after this. So thank you again so much, Jedidiah, Brendan, and Celine, for taking this time tonight for this panel discussion with DigiPen Singapore alumni and for being part of this collaboration. Personally, for me, myself, and even Houdin, we spoke about it a lot, and we never fail to be inspired by what you shared, and for you to share your journey also with us. So it is our true pleasure to work with you and with DigiPen Singapore, and we appreciate you for being here with us tonight. Thank you also to all our viewers who have been sitting in throughout the session. We appreciate all of your questions that you had for our speakers this evening. We also love to hear your feedback by scanning the QR code that can be found at the top right hand corner of the screen. So do share with us any feedback or thoughts that you have from joining us tonight. And if you'd like to find out more about our upcoming programs with DigiPen Singapore, do come by the museum this Friday, Saturday, and Sunday for Immersive Media Lab. You'll be able to play the game that Celine and her team has actually created, that's Stopping. So do come by and support, have a play from 11 a.m. this Friday. Have some fun with games, and there will also be an exclusive live tech demo for you to experience with. So this program is part of Gameplay, a 2-week special event that celebrates video games. So do join us for our on-site guided tours, our mini holiday camps, and our online programs that also include a 2-day conference that brings together diverse voices from Singapore's game and interactive media industry in 2 panels that's also organized with the Singapore Games Association. So in the meantime, please stay safe, everyone. Be well. And we look forward to seeing you in our next program, whether on-site or online. And a big thank you once again to Jedidiah Siah, Brendan Yu, and Celine Chen for the lovely session. Have a good night, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.